They say blood is thicker than water, but what happens when that blood feels more like poison coursing through your veins every family dinner, every conversation where you're dismissed before you even speak? I learned early that being the youngest Callahan meant being invisible. While my brother Leo charmed everyone with his Harvard MBA and empty promises, and my sister Chloe built her Instagram empire on daddy's dime, I sat in the corner of every family gathering, watching, listening, and slowly realizing that love in the Callahan household was a finite resource that had been entirely allocated before I was even born. My name is Evelyn Callahan, though everyone calls me Evie, as if even my full name was too much trouble. For 28 years, I've been the family's afterthought, the third child who came along when Dad was already convinced he had his perfect heir in Leo and his princess in Chloe. While they basked in his approval, I inherited his indifference. Dad built Callahan Construction from nothing, starting with a pickup truck in 1988. By the time I understood what it meant, the company had become one of Chicago's premier building firms. Dad's pride in his empire was matched only by his conviction that Leo would take over, with Chloe handling marketing. And me? I was supposed to be grateful for whatever scraps fell from their table. When Leo was 12, Dad took him to construction sites every weekend. When Chloe turned 16, she got her own corporate credit card and a marketing title. When I expressed interest at 14, Dad patted my head and told me to focus on my studies instead. So I did. I graduated valedictorian, earned a full scholarship to Northwestern for finance, then completed my MBA with a focus on mergers and acquisitions. Surely these achievements would earn me a place at the family table. I was wrong. After graduation, when I approached Dad about joining the company, he looked at me like a persistent solicitor. "Sweetheart, we already have Leo handling business. Maybe you should find your own path. Independence is good for young people." Independence. The word stung because it was rejection dressed as encouragement. Leo had never been pushed toward independence. He'd been groomed for dependence on Dad's approval. But me? I was expected to quietly disappear and build something from nothing. Here's what Dad didn't know. I had been making my own mark. For 5 years, while they assumed I was struggling to find my place, I had been building something that would make Callahan Construction look like a neighborhood lemonade stand. It started during my MBA, when I connected with investors looking for someone to identify undervalued construction companies. They didn't care that I was young or that my family didn't believe in me. They cared that I could analyze balance sheets and turn failing companies into profitable ventures. I started small with a hemorrhaging firm in Milwaukee. Within 18 months, I had restructured operations and tripled profits. Word spread, and soon I was acquiring struggling construction firms across the Midwest. I named my holding company Apex Holdings, built it carefully while maintaining complete anonymity. My name never appeared in public filings. Everything was structured through legal trusts. While Leo played golf and talked big about deals that never materialized, I was quietly building a construction empire. While Chloe posted hard hat photos, I was actually learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. By the time Apex Holdings reached over $200 million in valuation, I owned 17 construction companies across 5 states. I had become one of the most successful young executives in Midwest construction, and my family had no idea. When asked what I did, I said, "Consulting." It was boring enough that no one asked follow-up questions. Leo assumed I was a mid-level corporate drone. Chloe thought I worked with spreadsheets, and Dad never asked at all. For 3 years, I continued playing my assigned role while secretly building something that dwarfed their dreams. I attended family gatherings with a smile, filed away every detail about Callahan Construction's operations, and couldn't stop caring about the family business even though it had never cared about me. Which brings me to Thanksgiving 2023, the day everything changed. I arrived at the family mansion wearing the burgundy sweater Chloe had ordered for all of us, carrying expensive wine, and mentally preparing for another afternoon of being talked past. The house looked like a magazine spread because Chloe had hired staging companies for her perfectly autumn content. Dad was carving the turkey when I entered the dining room. Mom had passed 6 years earlier, and these gatherings had become stilted affairs, where we pretended the empty chair wasn't glaring evidence of what we'd lost. Mom had been the one who asked about my job, remembered my birthday, made me feel like I belonged. Leo held court with networking stories, Chloe live-tweeted while arranging shots, and Dad looked exhausted in a way that went deeper than physical tiredness. For a while, Conversation followed its usual pattern until Dad suddenly stood and set down his carving knife with enough force to rattle glasses. "I've had enough," he said, and something in his voice made us all stop talking. This wasn't usual frustrated grumbling. This was bigger. 35 years, Dad continued, voice rising. I've been building this company, working 18-hour days, sacrificing everything to build something that would last. And what do I have to show for it? A son who thinks business happens at cocktail parties, and a daughter who thinks Instagram likes translate to success. Leo started to protest, but Dad wasn't finished. I'm tired of pretending either of you understands what it takes to run a real business. I'm tired of hoping you'll prove me wrong. And I'm especially tired of watching this company's reputation suffer while you two play dress-up as executives. The silence was deafening. This was unprecedented. Dad never criticized Leo or Chloe. Leo found his voice first. Dad, what brought this on? The Peterson project is promising. Dad laughed bitterly. The Peterson project fell through 3 weeks ago because you forgot structural engineering costs. We would have lost money on every square foot. Leo's face went gray. I had no idea about Peterson, but his reaction confirmed Dad's words. And Chloe, your marketing strategies have brought in 0 new clients in 18 months. 0. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. Brand building takes time. You can't measure social media impact in simple numbers. Brand awareness doesn't pay for steel and concrete, Dad shot back. It doesn't make payroll when companies like Sterling Group are trying to drive us out of business. My blood went cold. Through Apex Holdings, I'd heard Sterling was in serious financial trouble, taking on too much debt. If they were targeting Callahan Construction, it wasn't from strength. They needed assets to avoid bankruptcy. Then Dad dropped the bomb. I'm selling Callahan Construction. The room erupted. Leo shouted about betrayal and legacy. Chloe cried about their future. I sat perfectly still, mind racing. Marcus Thorne has offered $60 million for the entire company. The deal closes next week. $60 million was an insult. Based on my analysis, Callahan Construction was worth at least $80 million. More importantly, if Marcus Thorne was buying, this was predatory acquisition by someone planning to strip the company for parts. I knew this because I'd seen Sterling Group's reports. They were leveraged beyond reason, surviving by acquiring companies, liquidating assets, and using cash to service debt. Classic death spiral that could only end in bankruptcy. I opened my mouth to speak, to share what I knew, to stop this catastrophe. But Leo was shouting, Chloe was crying, and Dad looked so disappointed that I realized he wouldn't listen right now. Dad, I said quietly, then louder. Dad. He looked at me with surprise, as if he'd forgotten I was there. What is it, Evie? This was my moment. Instead, I found myself asking, are you sure about Sterling Group's financials? Dad's expression shifted to mild irritation. Evie, sweetheart, this is complex business. I've been doing this 35 years. I think I can handle negotiating without input from someone in consulting. There it was. The dismissal I should have expected, delivered with casual condescension. Even when trying to save him from the biggest mistake of his life, I was still just little Evie who didn't understand the real world. Something inside me snapped. Not dramatic, explosive snap, but the quiet, fundamental kind that happens when the last thread holding a broken thing together gives way. I stood slowly, smoothed my sweater, and looked around the table. You're right, Dad. I don't understand how the real world works. I'm just a consultant with no construction experience. Dad's expression softened, probably thinking I was backing down like always. I'll see you all at the signing, I said, and walked out before anyone could respond. The drive home gave me time to think. Dad said the deal closed next week, which meant 7 days to put together a counteroffer that would save Callahan Construction and prove that the daughter they'd ignored for 3 decades was the only one capable of preserving their legacy. I called my lawyer before getting home. Sarah, it's Evie. I need acquisition documents for Callahan Construction, ready by next Friday. Sarah Chen had handled all Apex Holdings acquisitions with discretion and competence. Callahan Construction? Isn't that your family's company? Yes, I said simply. And I'm going to buy it. The week that followed was the most intense of my professional life. While Leo and Chloe called family friends trying to talk Dad out of the sale, I orchestrated due diligence that would have impressed Fortune 500 executives. My teams pulled every piece of information about both companies. What I found confirmed my worst fears about Sterling and highest hopes about Callahan Construction. Sterling was carrying $40 million in debt against $25 million in assets, with negative cash flow for 2 years. They were maybe 6 months from insolvency. Callahan's acquisition wasn't business expansion. It was a last-ditch asset strip mining operation. Callahan Construction was genuinely valuable. Quality reputation, reliable suppliers, skilled workforce, 18-month project pipeline. The only problems were outdated management, inefficient costs, and lack of strategic planning. All fixable for someone who knew what they were doing. Despite Leo and Chloe's efforts to drive it into the ground, Dad's core business remained strong. At $60 million, Sterling was stealing it. At $80 million, it would be fair. At $95, it would properly value potential under improved management. I decided to offer $100 million. Friday morning, I put on my best suit and drove to Dad's law firm, presenting myself as representing a competing bidder. The conference room was exactly what you'd expect. Mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. Dad sat with his lawyer, looking older than ever. Marcus Thorne sat across with his legal team. Leo and Chloe looked like they were attending a funeral. Everyone stared when I walked in. Marcus's lawyer spoke first. "This is a private meeting. Reception can help you." I smiled and set down my portfolio. "I'm here for the Callahan Construction acquisition. I'm representing a competing bidder." Beautiful silence. Dad's mouth fell open. Leo and Chloe looked confused. Marcus shifted from confusion to concern. "Evie, what are you talking about? Who are you representing?" Instead of answering, I plugged my USB into the presentation screen. The first slide showed Sterling Group's logo, followed by financial charts that made Marcus go pale. "Sterling Group's debt-to-asset ratio," I said, clicking through slides showing declining revenue, negative cash flow, desperate refinancing. Their payment delays to contractors. Their project completion record with massive overruns. I turned to Marcus, who was frantically whispering to lawyers. And my favorite, their bankruptcy risk assessment showing 87% probability of insolvency within 18 months. Marcus started objecting, but I held up my hand. All public data, completely verifiable. Next slides showed Callahan Construction's actual position. By contrast, here's what Sterling is trying to acquire. Profitable company with consistent growth, excellent reputation, strong pipeline. Worth significantly more than $60 million. Dad stared like seeing his company's financials for the first time. Conservative valuation, $82 million. Premium valuation based on growth potential, $95 million. Which brings me to why I'm here. Final slide. Apex Holdings logo. And purchase offer. $100 million. Cash offer, immediate closing, retaining all employees and preserving the Callahan brand. Room erupted exactly as expected. Marcus claimed the offer was impossible, demanding to know who funded Apex. Leo and Chloe talked over each other. Dad just stared. "Who is Apex Holdings?" he asked quietly. I removed a bound document from my portfolio. Apex Holdings is a construction holding company specializing in regional firm acquisition and development. 5 years, 17 companies, over $200 million combined valuation. Operations in 5 states, 800 employees. I slid the document to Dad. Privately held, all decisions by a single managing partner with MBA in finance and M.A. specialization. Dad opened it, expression shifting from confusion to surprise to understanding. The managing partner of Apex Holdings is Evelyn Callahan. Me. I am Apex Holdings, and I'm offering $100 million for Callahan Construction. Complete silence. Marcus recovered first. "This is impossible. Some consulting nobody can't have built a $200 million company in 5 years. This has to be fraud." I smiled with 5 years of negotiation experience. "Mr. Thorne, I've provided detailed disclosures for both companies. Challenge authenticity through legal channels if you'd like. Meanwhile, you'll find my offer significantly more attractive than yours." Dad was reading Apex documentation, finger-tracing numbers that told the story of everything I'd built while he wasn't paying attention. Evie, is this real? You really built all this? Every acquisition, every contract, every employee. Started with $50,000 from venture capital contacts during MBA. Built it by identifying undervalued companies, improving operations, operating as subsidiaries, or selling for profit. Construction industry is full of family businesses run by people who understand work but not modern business practices. I understand both. Leo found his voice. Why didn't you tell us? We could have worked together. I looked at my brother, trying to see if he genuinely didn't understand. Leo, 3 hours ago when I walked in, Dad's lawyer assumed I was lost. Even now, Marcus's first assumption is that my success must be fraudulent. Why do you think I kept it secret? The answer hung in the air because admitting it required confronting 30 years of family dynamics everyone pretended were normal. Chloe was crying real tears. We never gave you a chance. Never asked what you were doing, never showed interest in your life. I felt the old familiar pain, decades of wanting exactly this recognition. But it was dulled now by satisfaction of knowing I'd built something extraordinary without their help. No, you didn't. But that's not why I'm here today. I looked around the table. I'm here because Callahan Construction deserves better than being strip-mined. Because Frank Peterson and 200 employees deserve to keep jobs. And because despite everything, this represents Dad's life work, and I won't watch it be destroyed by someone who sees it as assets to liquidate. Dad set down documents and looked at me directly for the first time in my adult life. You did all this to save the company? I did all this to prove I was worth your attention. Saving the company is just a side benefit. The meeting lasted 3 more hours. Marcus fought every way possible, but from weakness. My offer was $40 million higher with verifiable financing, airtight documentation, and a buyer who understood construction. More importantly, when Dad asked serious questions about my experience and development plans, I was the only one who'd thought through long-term implications. I'd developed detailed strategies for operational improvements, market expansion, integration synergies. Marcus couldn't even explain how he'd maintain current contracts without institutional knowledge from the workforce he planned to fire. By afternoon's end, we had a signed agreement. Callahan Construction acquired by Apex Holdings for $100 million, closing within 30 days. Dad would remain as senior advisor, Leo would transition to project management under proper supervision, Chloe would head legitimate marketing focused on business development rather than vanity metrics. And me? CEO of expanded Apex Holdings, overseeing a construction empire worth over $300 million, employing more than 1,000 people across the Midwest. Walking out, I felt something I'd never experienced: complete absence of need for anyone else's approval. For 30 years, I'd tried earning family respect, proving I deserved to be taken seriously, finding my place at their table. Now I owned the table, bought with money earned by being exactly who they'd never bothered to see. The next months were integration whirlwind. True to promise, I retained every employee who wanted to stay. Leo threw himself into learning with more focus than I'd ever seen. Chloe discovered genuine talent for business development when focused on substance rather than style. Dad was most interesting. For weeks he seemed shell-shocked, unable to believe his overlooked daughter had built an empire and used it to save his life's work. But transformation happened when reviewing quarterly reports and he suddenly looked up. I always wondered why you never seemed interested in the business. I looked at this man who'd shaped my life through indifference. Dad, I was interested. I was always interested. You just never asked. He was quiet, then spoke softer. I'm asking now. What do you see for this company? For the first time in my life, my father asked for my opinion and listened to my answer. Business results spoke for themselves. Within a year, we'd secured $50 million in new contracts, expanded into 3 additional states, achieved profit margins exceeding industry averages by 30%. We'd gone from regional company struggling with family drama to major Midwest commercial development player. But personal results were more satisfying. Family dinners were actually about family. Everyone's contributions were valued, voices heard, conversation about building together rather than competing for attention. Ultimate vindication came a year later when Sterling Group filed bankruptcy. Marcus's predatory model finally collapsed, taking down other acquired companies. If Dad had sold to Sterling, Callahan Construction would have been liquidated, hundreds losing jobs. Instead, we were thriving. Dad's company was preserved and expanded. Employees retained and given advancement opportunities, legacy intact and enhanced beyond original imagination. Looking back, the woman who walked out of Thanksgiving dinner was fundamentally different from who walked into that law firm. Not in business acumen or resources, but in willingness to stop waiting for permission to be who I'd always been capable of being. For 30 years, I'd asked my family to see me, value me, give me a place at their table. It took 3 decades to realize I didn't need their permission to build my own table. I built a business empire because I wanted my father's respect, but I kept building because I learned to respect myself. That made all the difference. The Callahan legacy isn't what Dad originally intended. It's not the story of a son taking over or daughter supporting through traditional channels. It's about a daughter who was overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed, who responded by building something so extraordinary it could absorb and enhance everything her family had dreamed of creating. And that turned out to be a much better legacy than any of us originally planned.